whatever the heck you're doing, I'm delighted that you've chosen to spend some time with me. Hey, have you ever felt like you or a member of your team had just some amazing potential? Yeah, I've heard this word a lot myself. Potential is great, but it doesn't equal results. And in our busy world, achieving more can seem so elusive, even when bigger opportunities seem possible. Today, my buddy Thom Singer is one of those guys who's become totally obsessed with helping people take the leap across the gap between potential and results. Now, what's cool is he's also got this great podcast that we're going to talk about called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do with Thom Singer. Duh, he's Thom Singer. So he's interviewed, get this, dropping tomorrow, episode 412, 412 cool people, I guess 411 and me, on this podcast, named in Inc. as one of the 8 best business podcasts to listen to in 2018. He's got an eclectic career in sales and marketing for Fortune 500 companies, law firms, and small companies. He's written 12 books, and my favorite part about Thom and the fact that he's a great guy is that, get this, when he was 21 years old, he was a 5-day returning champion on the $25,000 pyramid game. Not a pyramid scheme, a pyramid game. Thom Singer, what's up, buddy? I'm so glad you're here.
Bill, until being interviewed by you, being on the 25, Dick Clark was my favorite host that I ever met. But now you have surpassed Dick Clark.
Awesome. One day I hope to be as wealthy as Dick Clark. That would be nice, huh?
He's dead. One day we'll both be as dead as Dick Clark. So,
well, there we go. So you got to aspire to some sort of greatness, right, Thom?
There you go.
Cool. Well, hey, so I've known you, Thom. we knew each other online back 100 years ago.
It goes back to 2005 because it was right when I started my blog. And people are like, "What's a blog?" And I go, "I don't know, but when you put it online, Phil Gerbicek calls you."
That's true, man. I probably did stalk you pretty early on, which was always interesting, right?
Yeah, no, I remember talking to you very soon after I started blogging. So that had to be 2005 or 2006.
Yep. Well, I started my blog in 2005. I remember because the numbers are sequential. 03, 04, 05. Real easy for me to remember. So, yeah, but you had this awesome Blogspot blog, and then you started writing books and doing other cool stuff. And now you've got this killer podcast. So, Thom, talk to me about why are you doing a podcast at 412 episodes? I mean, this is pretty epic, man.
So I started it in 2014, and I was kind of late to the game, but it was before everybody had a podcast. Because as you know, now if you breathe air, they give you a podcast.
Yes.
2014, I actually was at the National Speakers Association annual conference, and I was listening to somebody speak, and they were talking about if you're ever in a rut in your career, one of the ways to get out of the rut is to go interview, and I forget if it was 25 or 50. In my mind, I think it was 50, but that sounds like a lot. Successful people, because success leaves clues. So if you go talk to really successful people about what they're doing, how they got there, what they're doing, you can't walk away from those interviews not being out of your rut with some ideas on how to grow your business. And so I was going to just do this for my blog. I was going to do a weekly interview where I would interview really successful people and get their ideas. And people started saying, well, you should make that a podcast. And I had listened to a few podcasts, so I started researching the medium, and I decided I was just going to do 50 interviews. It was going to be a 6-month project. I was going to interview 50 people, 2 shows a week, and that was going to be my thing. But once I finished the 50 episodes, it started to have some traction. I actually got booked for a speaking gig because of someone I met through the podcast. And I thought, well, I'm not going to stop here. And now I've learned so much. I've become so much of a better interviewer. And I've had access to people. And then the last thing I'll tell you is the biggest secret is my podcast, and I taught networking skills. My podcast has been the best networking tool I've ever encountered in my entire career.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with that. I mean, I've podcasted on and off since actually we started the blog. Back in 2006, I was on the Great Big Small Business Show, The Great BSers with Chris Brogan and Becky McRae and Zane Safrit and Ted Demopoulos. And then Ted wrote this book, What Nobody Ever Tells You About Blogging and Podcasting, back when like podcasting had like 1.5% penetration. Like there was like 17 podcasts and things have blown up. To your point, it's funny you say, though, that it's kind of saturated because still Tom Webster did the research at Edison Research. 52% of people don't even know what a podcast is yet, Tom.
No, that is entirely true. As I talk to people all the time, who come up. Well, the greatest example I use with other people who are speakers is I've written a bunch of books, and that's part of my intro when I get introduced at the front of the room to be the keynote speaker. But it also says I'm the host of Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do, 4 years, over 400 episodes. Afterwards, I've talked about an entirely different subject. Afterwards, people come up with their phones in their hand, and they either say, oh, I just downloaded your podcast or subscribed. But a lot of people come up with their phone in their hand and they go, how do I even find where to get a podcast? So I don't know if they didn't listen to everything I said for an hour or what, but they definitely come up and want to know how to access it.
Thom, you're not giving how-tos though on how to download a podcast in your keynote, man.
No, that's the whole thing. I'm talking about entirely different subjects, but the audience is intrigued, whether they're podcast listeners or not, that I have a long-running show. I think that longevity has given me a leg up in 2018 because a lot of people end up with pod fade. They start a podcast and 7 to 12 episodes later, they're not doing it anymore. I treated it on a production schedule. I had to put out 2 shows a week. And honestly, I've missed several. I've probably missed a dozen, but over 4 years, that dozen doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think the fact that you do have longevity and the fact, you talk to some really interesting people. You've had some really great guests on over the span of 400 episodes. So who is your favorite episode besides me, of course?
No, I was going to say Phil Gerbicek changed the focus of my life when I interviewed him. I got out of my rut because you were on my show.
Right. Yeah, that's it. So otherwise, besides me.
So, it's kind of like asking me to choose between my children, which I wouldn't do, although they would tell you that I do, but I don't. And I do remember early on, I interviewed, he's not there anymore, I don't think, but I interviewed the CEO of Ghirardelli Chocolate. And what I remembered most about that is I kept thinking, how cool, what kid doesn't want to grow up to run a chocolate factory? And he had grown up inside the company. He'd been a salesman, then he was sales manager, and as sales manager, he had really increased the size of the company. So they gave him the whole company, and then he doubled and tripled this old 100-year-old brand. He was able to grow it so exponentially. And I just always remembered that. And then afterwards, 3 days later, I got a box of Ghirardelli caramel and dark chocolate squares in the mail. So he kind of ranks as my favorite guy.
Ooh, yeah. Getting chocolate, bribing a podcast host is always nice. I'll take those as well. I prefer money, but gifts are good too. I actually was drinking coffee today out of my mug that I got from Zvi Band, who's the CEO of Contactually, who had me on his show. He sent me this mug after hosting me, which I thought was even better. So that's pretty cool. I really like that. That's a thoughtful gift. So have you gotten anything weird? Have you Tom Jones did it all? Anybody throwing stuff up on the stage because you're a podcast host or what?
No, nobody throws panties at me or anything like that. But it is weird. I was actually talking to somebody at a networking event here in Austin, and I have a lot of people who listen in Austin. I interview a lot of local Austin entrepreneurs. I live in an entrepreneurial hotbed. So, and I was talking to somebody, and this guy turned around and he goes, "I know this sounds awkward, but do you have a podcast?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "Are you Thom Singer?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "I listen to your show all the time when I drive to and from work. I listen both days a week that the show comes out." And he goes, "While you were talking," he goes, "I could just hear the nuances of your voice. And all of a sudden I felt like I was driving to work. And all of a sudden I figured it had to be you." And I thought that was a little weird, but in a way it was cool.
Well, that's really cool. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons why I podcast is because it's super intimate. We get to be between people's ears. Even if they only put in one earbud, it still really rattles around in their head. And people do get used to our cadence. And they're like, "Hey, I recognize that voice," which as a speaker, that's fantastic because if they recognize our voice and they like it, it's an opportunity for us to get booked.
And one of the things I've done a few times, and I'm going to do it more often, is I'll interview, if I'm speaking for an association, I'll interview the board president or the executive director a month or two before I'm going to be the keynote speaker. And then they send it out. And then it's funny because the audience feels they know me already if they've listened to the interview. And most of them will listen to the interview with the person from their association or their company. But then they'll go back and listen to 3, 4 or more other episodes. And so that is sort of one of the cool things is if an audience will listen to at least one, if not more shows, they feel more connected to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a handshake and a hug all in once before we even get on stage, which is both awkward and wonderful. So Tom, 12 books, man. That's impressive. I have to say. I mean, I've written, 5. I'm working on number 6. So I'm almost half of Thom Singer, which that's my aspiration. Dick Clark and Thom Singer. Those are my two heroes. So how do you do that, man? How do you write 12 books, Tom?
So there's two ways. One is several of my books. I have this series I call, the first one was the ABCs of Networking. It was actually my second book, but I wrote it on my blog. So it was A is for attitude, B is for brand, C is for creativity. And then we took it off the blog, gave it to an editor who what I called unblogged it, because you write differently on a blog. On a blog, you say, click here, or yesterday I was doing this. Well, in a book, you can't do either of those things. People are trying to click on the page. It doesn't work. I wrote several of them that way, where they are all short chapters about the length of a long blog post, which really worked well for me to get a lot of those, the ABC series done. I have the ABCs of legal marketing, the ABCs of entrepreneurship, the ABCs of speaking skills. And so all of those were written and put together where it's 26 short essays. And then a couple of the other books I wrote with co-authors. And so what I did is my first book, the one that sold well, I sold like 25 or 30,000 copies, which, doesn't get you on the New York Times bestseller unless you do that in a week. I did that over several years, but it's still a good number. And I turned that book over to a woman who rewrote it as Some Assembly Required, a networking guide for women, and then a realtor, and then a lady who was an expert in college grads. So several of the books are like, I call it being the Tom Sawyer of book writing. I got some people to take my work and then customize it for their expertise.
Ooh, that's an interesting way to do it. I really like that. So are you still listed as the lead author then, or how does that work, Tom?
So in every case, because I've known some of these people, I've let them be the lead author because I already wrote a book. But easily I could have put myself first and they would have been like, okay. But I gave them the chance to have their name first, because why not? And these weren't books being put out by Random House and things like this. I was through a boutique publisher. It wasn't like I expected it to be this huge, million seller. So therefore my ego didn't, in one of the rare cases, my ego didn't jump in that my name had to be first.
That's funny. That's interesting. I like that you collaborated though, because I think collaboration is some of the most fun that we get to have. And certainly whenever we can be helpful from that, not just value added, but helpful and help other people help their ego, that certainly is helpful as well.
No, and I'm a real big believer that all opportunities in life come from people. And so if we try to make it all about ourselves, we end up in a cocoon and then we get pissed off at the world. And so I've always found it's better when I work with somebody else. Plus, I can be easily distracted. So if I promise somebody I'm going to have my chapter done by the 13th, I'm going to have it done by the 13th because I gave him my word. If I promise myself I'm going to have the chapter done by the 13th, the book never comes out.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Commit to somebody else, commit in public, commit as many places as you can, and then it's got to get done. So that's really good, man. Good advice. So along that though, Tom, I bet you got 100 more books in you, man. You got a lot of potential, don't you, to write more?
Well, the podcast has really taken over as my sort of labor of love. And so I have not written, I don't blog very much anymore because I podcast twice a week. And, social media is a big time suck. And so, I end up surfing what people are putting pictures of their burrito on Facebook. So I end up not writing as much as I used to. However, my new topic, I've done about 2 years worth of research and interviews, both using the podcast for part of the research of interviews, but also a survey and then phone call interviews around what I call the paradox of potential. And it's going to be a book, but I'm not going to force this book. This book may take a few years to get done because the research that I've come up with, just scratching the surface, is extremely powerful. And I'm speaking about it already, and it's having real impact on people. I mean, I'm getting notes back from people saying, I did what you said, and it was scary, but it worked. And so there's something around this whole focus of potential that is bigger than just, I'm going to punch out a book.
Yeah, I think so. I actually was fortunate enough to see you do that live, and you did a great job about the paradox of potential. But let's start with that first word, that paradox, right? What does that mean, Tom, to you?
Well, so, in regards to the paradox of potential, we get so excited about potential and we think, oh my gosh, we hired Becky. She's great. She came out of this top university. She has all this experience. She's going to change our department. And then a year later, you're transitioning Becky out of the company and it didn't work out. Well, how come? You were so excited about the potential. Well, potential doesn't mean anything. Potential does not equal results. Potential is not actual action. And so it's a paradox because we get so excited about potential, but potential alone is crap. So, I mean, you know, the old saying, right? Knowledge is what? Knowledge is
Power.
yeah, come on, say that with a little more enthusiasm.
Knowledge is power, Tom.
Power. No, it's not.
No.
Knowledge is simply potential. If we don't do anything with that knowledge, it's BS. And so that's where this whole idea of potential being a paradox sort of came in. It came to me while I was running one day because I'd been researching potential, talking to people about potential. And like a little voice in my head said, yeah, but potential doesn't matter without these other things. What do you have to do to get farther across the gap? And then here's the other secret. You'll never reach your potential because if you're moving across the gap, you're going to listen to a new podcast. You're going to find a mentor. You're going to read a book. You're going to get a new degree or a new certification. Something's going to happen. Your potential is going to shift out. So you're never going to get there. It's like chasing your shadow. It's always moving forward.
So we shouldn't be disappointed then that we didn't actually reach our potential, because that was my concern when I was a kid, right? I always got told, oh, you have so much potential. You just need to unlock your potential. Well, screw that, right? Like I'm never going to get there. So does that mean we don't try, or what does that mean, Tom?
Well, you bring up an interesting point because a lot of people get really focused on like not wanting to be a goal setter because they have potential. So they're going to set this goal and they go, oh, I gave up setting goals years ago because I would set a goal that I was going to get a $30,000 raise by the end of the year. And then when I got a smaller raise, I was all disappointed in myself. And I'd be like, well, how much did you get? And they go like $23,000, more. And I'm like, well, that's a great number. And they're like, yeah, but it wasn't the 30. The goal was bullshit. Well, no, because you were chasing the goal. Maybe you got to 23. Maybe if you didn't have the goal, you would have gotten 15. So I'm a real big believer that you strive for whatever you can. You push the limits of yourself and your potential. And instead of beating yourself up when you come up a little bit short, reward yourself that where would I have been if I wasn't chasing that potential, if I wasn't chasing that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot. I think getting close is better than getting done. Like being that expectation of 30 is great, but 20 is still better than 5. Yeah. So we should celebrate that. So let's talk a little bit about goal setting, Tom. As we're getting close to the end of the year, a lot of people are thinking resolutions, and I got to tell you, I hate resolutions. Resolutions are, for me anyway, they just don't work because they don't last. It takes us 66 days to create a habit. But if I set a goal and an intention for what my year is going to look like, I'm a lot better. Last year, every year, of course, I strive to be at least a little bit better. But last year, my goal was to double my business. That was a big goal. But then as I finally got my taxes done in October, I realized I actually lost money last year. So if I actually make $1 this year, I have exceeded that, which is good news. But that's not a real good goal. So do you set goals, Tom? And tell me about your process.
So I'm a real big believer in goals. And I think whether you call it a goal or resolutions, people say, oh, they're bullshit. There'll be a ton of articles. In fact, play a little game. And everybody who's listening to this, put a little sticky next to your computer that says, how many anti-goal, anti-resolution articles will I read online in January? Because everyone from like Forbes and Inc., all these writers are going to say, oh, the reason goals don't work, why goals suck, why resolutions are big sticks up your butt, all this stuff. And they write the article because it gets people going, yeah, I feel that way too. And they read the article. But no matter what you call it, it's just a target, right? So I set goals every year that I want to target myself for. And it's kind of like, have you ever taken a little kid bowling?
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do when you take a little kid bowling? You push that button, it does what? It puts up
bumper guards are up.
Puts up the bumper guards. Your goals, your targets are really just like bumper guards. It makes it easier for you to answer to make those tough decisions that come up every day. Because it doesn't matter what you do in your career. Every day you're forced with, do I read who's having a burrito on Facebook, or do I write that report for the client? You're going to make a choice. And if you're constantly reminded of what your goals are, of what your targets are, it's easier to move forward. They're just the bumpers. They make it easy to answer the tough questions because you just ask yourself, does this action bring me closer to my goal or farther from my goal? And it should make it easy to be like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be reading about burritos. So that's why I think, goals are important because they keep you on track. But the problem is, the reason they don't work for a lot of people is they write them and they forget them. Like you said, and I've heard different numbers, 30 days, 66 days. I don't know how many days it takes to create a habit. It takes doing the action over and over again forever days to create a new habit. So you have to just keep doing. And so I tell people, print the goals out, put them next to your computer, put them in your car. My friend Chad Goldwasser, who's a speaker and a realtor, like used to be one of the top realtors in Austin. He's about to release a new book. He actually takes his goals and laminates them and pastes them in the shower. And it's kind of awkward, but like if you're really into like career and success and you're ever at his house, he'll take you into his shower and show you they're laminated and posted to the wall. And then while he's shampooing his hair, he goes over all of his goals for the year every single day. Well, does he reach every single goal? And he writes a lot of them. I believe in having fewer. He puts a lot. Does he reach them all? No, but he reaches some of them and he moves farther along the path on others. So I think you've got to do that. I haven't gone as far as to post them in the shower, but I do carry them in my wallet. I shrink them down to a card size, and I've got them on my computer so they pop up from time to time. I have reminders set, so I'll go over them. And I think you need to have at least 3 goals, and you can have 2 in each category if you want, but you got to have a business goal. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to grow your business 10% or by a dollar amount or whatever. You have to have a personal life goal. Like my wife and I wanted to travel more. So the last couple of years, we've made a point, even if they were smaller trips, if we didn't have the money to do big things, we did smaller trips. When the opportunity came to go to Costa Rica with a friend, we said yes, because that was one of our goals. And then we found the money. And then the third category is your soul goal. And that is something that's for you. And one of the things I've been teaching people who I've been working with this year, especially younger people, I have some millennials and like 30-ish-year-old people who I mentor and coach. And I've been talking to them about the fact that if you're married with a family, this is a good example, but it happens to single people as well. Don't make all your goals and all your actions about being a good employee, about being a good spouse, about being a good father. You have to have that soul goal. And it's not religious. It's just your soul. It's just you. What is something you want to do to feed yourself? So I personally, one of the things I've been doing is I've been doing stand-up comedy. And I met this young guy in Kansas City, and he's awesome and he's ambitious and he has a great job with a tech company. He's making all this money, and he's like 30 years old and he has 4 kids under the age of 9. I'm like, that is a lot of kids to be 30 years old and have 4 kids. But as a college student, he wanted to do stand-up, and he never pursued it. He did it a few times. And after a 10-year gap, while he was on the road, he went to an open mic night and he really liked it. And I met him the second time. But his wife wasn't being real supportive of it because they have 4 kids under 9. And we had this conversation, and I said, you're not looking to do it 7 days a week. I mean, the people who are really trying to become comics, they'll do like 15 open mic nights a week, 3 a night. And he just wanted once a week or maybe every other week to go. And he ended up having a conversation with his wife about he needed something that was just his. And it was only 3 hours after the kids went to bed, 1 night a week. And he called me and said, his wife looked at him and said, well, when you put it that way, Monday or Wednesday night, whatever night the open mic, Wednesday night is your night after 7 o'clock. And now for several months, I think he does it twice a month. That's what he does. And he said that he's happier, but his wife is happy to support it. Even though he's not going to quit his job and become a comic, he's doing something for him. And so I think that's important, is you got to carve out that soul goal.
Ooh, I've not heard that one. I mean, of course, business, I've heard that one lots of times, heard about life, but the soul goal, something just for me, that's really, really good, Tom. I've got to think about that before year end here and, get a head start on that, because I firmly believe you start where you are and not where you want to be, right? So I'm going to start, this week, I'm going to start thinking on that, thinking about what the heck my soul goal is, Tom. So thanks for that insight, man. That's really good. That's really good. So what's you're going to work on the Paradox of Potential book. You're podcasting. You're doing stand-up comedy. What else is next for Thom Singer?
Well, somebody asked me what's next, and I really just want to do more of the same. I really like what I do. I need to grow my business. I have a daughter who's a senior in college, and I have to pay off. I had some of it saved, and she got some scholarships, but I took on some debt to be able to allow her to go and have a great college experience. And I'm glad we did that. She'll be graduating from Carnegie Mellon University in June, but I've got a little chunk of change that I wasn't ready to have spent. And then I've got another one right behind her. I've got a 16-year-old who will be leaving for college in 2 years. And simultaneously, the oldest one will be getting married because she just got engaged. And so there's a lot of expenses coming my way. So I need to have those goals, and I need to have the actions to grow my business. But I'm a keynote speaker, and I'm a master of ceremonies, and I have a lot of fun doing what I do, and I like to believe I'm good at it. And so the next chapter for me is just doing more of the same. It's working with, in fact, somebody was like, oh, I want to get on bigger stages with more expensive clients and bigger. I kind of just love the people I work with. I just want more of them at the level I'm at. I don't have to become fancy.
Awesome. So more Thom Singer all the time. Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do is Tom's podcast. ThomSinger.com is his website. ThomSinger.com. And Tom, you said social media is a time sig. So if people want to talk to you more, where would you send them? How would they get connected with you?
Oh, well, I said it's a time suck, but I'm deeply sucked into social media. Duh. You can find me on all the social medias, the Twitters, the things like that. It's at Thom Singer usually is sort of the place to find me. And then ThomSinger.com kind of shows you everything I got going on. That's my little hub. And then you can just, email me is, good. Whatever. I'm always apt to responding to people too.
That's fantastic, Tom. Well, cool. So this is all about potential, all about setting goals. Tom talked about 3 goals that you can use as you're bringing your year to a close or as you want to jumpstart your next year. Set business goals, set life goals, and set some soul goals. Make it a better day tomorrow than it was today. And thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.